Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to another lesson number 21 already. In today's lesson, we are going to have a look at the question words in Spanish. So we are going to look at words like what, why, where, how, and so forth. Now, today's lesson is quite an important lesson because question words are used quite regularly, not only in the English language, but also in the Spanish language. So for today's lesson, I really recommend you to pay full attention and to also note everything down, take all of your notes in your notebook or whatever it is that you're using. Alright, so today's lesson, question words in Spanish. Let's get into the first one. Alright, so the first question word that we will learn is the word what in English, which in Spanish is
¿Qué? ¿Qué?
And because it's a question word, obviously we also use the two question marks at the beginning and at the end of the word. So what in English is qué in Spanish. And as always, make sure to write down the accent on top of the E, because qué without the accent actually means something different. It means that. So we don't want to write that, but we want to write what. So make sure to use the accent. Qué, what. Alright, so then as an example sentence, we have
¿Quieres comer? ¿Quieres comer?
Of course, this becomes
¿Qué quieres comer? ¿Qué quieres comer?
And in these examples from now on, I will show you the literal translation of what the Spanish sentence means. And I'm doing this on purpose because I think that it will help you to better understand how the sentences are formed. So instead of writing the English translation, so what do you want to eat, I'm writing exactly what every part of the sentence means. So qué means what, quieres is you want, and comer is to eat. So that's the literal translation of the sentence in Spanish. And then of course, to make it sound good in English, we add the do. So what do you want to eat? Or for example, if you look at this sentence, ¿Qué pasa? It literally means something like what happens. Pasa comes from the verb pasar, which means to happen. So ¿Qué pasa? Is what happens, or what is happening, or what is going on. Or most likely you already know this phrase, or you might hear someone say like ¿Qué pasa? Which literally means what happens. But then if we translate it to English, it means something like what's going on. Alright, so the first word ¿Qué, which means what. Let's look at the second question word. So the second question word is the word why, which is
¿Por qué? ¿Por qué?
So again, we have ¿Qué, but this time we add por in front of it, and we leave a space in between. So it becomes ¿Por qué?
¿Por qué?
Why? And we just learned that ¿Qué means what. So por is for. So for what is the literal thing you're saying. So for what? Which in English you would translate to why. So ¿Por qué? For what? Why? ¿Por qué? Why? Again, the accent on the E here. Now another thing that's very important to notice is that there's this space between por and qué, which I said before. If we write ¿Por qué without the space, it actually means something different. It means because. So it's very important that we write it as two different words to say why. Here again, we see how different Spanish is compared to the English language when it comes to all of these tiny little rules that we have to apply, which can drastically change the meaning of a word. So that's something we have to pay extra attention to because as non-native speakers, we're not used to doing this. Alright, so let's look at another example sentence with the word why. So,
¿Tienes hambre? ¿Tienes hambre?
Why tienes is you have, and hambre is hunger. So why you have hunger, or why are you hungry? And of course this becomes
¿Por qué tienes hambre? ¿Por qué tienes hambre?
And tienes, we've learned that verb conjugation before. Tienes is you have, because it has this S at the end. If it would say tiene without the S, it would be he has, or she has, or you formal have. So for example, why he has hunger. Porque tiene hambre. But if we say porque tienes hambre with the S, then it means why do you have hunger? So why are you hungry? So from now on, in these examples, you will see that we are leaving out or omitting the subject pronouns. Because as we learned in a previous lesson, this is a very common thing to do in Spanish. So I want you to get used to this. If you're still a bit confused about how this omitting of subject pronouns works, then don't worry. We will go over many more examples, and slowly but surely you will get better and better at it. Language learning just takes time. Alright, and then finally another phrase that you might hear a lot, which is
¿Por qué no? ¿Por qué no?
which is why not? Because we add the no, we add not. So, ¿por qué no? Why not? This is a very popular phrase that you will likely hear a lot. Alright, then the next question word, which is almost similar to por qué, but this time we say para qué.
¿Para qué? ¿Para qué?
And this also means why, but it has a slightly different use. To be honest,
¿Para qué?
it's not really used that often. You will very frequently hear por qué being used, but sometimes we use para qué, especially as a way of saying why in a sense of for what reason or for what purpose. So for example, why are you here? For what reason are you here? Which is,
¿Estáis aquí? ¿Estáis aquí?
and estáis comes from the verb estar, which we learned before, and estáis is the conjugation for vosotros or vosotras. So then this doesn't become por qué estás aquí, but para qué estás aquí, because we're forming the sentence as a way of saying for what reason are you here?
¿Para qué estáis aquí? ¿Para qué estáis aquí?
And again, literally translated the sentence, it means why, para qué, you are, estáis, here, aquí. Or you could also say acá instead of aquí. It's pretty much the same thing. Depends on which country you're in. So this is kind of an extra process that we have to go to, which is to kind of reverse engineer the sentence. So we first break the sentence down into different parts, then we translate those parts into English, and then we form the proper English sentence. So it's a couple of extra steps, which can be a bit annoying, but eventually you will start to recognize certain words or phrases, and you don't really have to go through that whole translating process again. But if you're not sure about what a sentence means, don't look at the whole sentence, just break the sentence down into different parts. And usually you will find that things start to make sense if you just translate them bit by bit. Alright, let's get into the next question word, which is where. Where, which in Spanish is
¿Dónde? ¿Dónde?
again with the accent on the O. Dónde. So for example, where are you? Or where are they? Están can mean you are or they are, depending on which country you're in. So we would say,
¿Dónde están? ¿Dónde están?
where are you? Or where are they?
¿Dónde están?
Or as another example, a sentence that you will probably hear very often being used is ¿Dónde estás? Which means where are you? Literally translated, it means where. ¿Dónde? Estás is you are, so where you are. But in English we flip these last two words around, so it becomes where are you?
¿Dónde estás? ¿Dónde estás?
Alright, next question word is a very famous one as well, which is
¿Cómo? ¿Cómo?
which means how. Again, accent on the O. With all of these question words, you will see that we always use the accents. Alright, so ¿cómo? How. So for example, estás. Estás. How are you? How you are. How are you? We learned this one before. So it's
¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo estás?
how are you? So how, ¿cómo? Alright, then we have
¿Quién? ¿Quién?
which is who. Or we can also say quién es,
¿Quién es?
which is whom if it's multiple people. So for example, who is your friend?
¿Es tu amigo? ¿Quién es tu amigo? ¿Quién es tu amigo?
¿Quién is who, es is tu, your amigo friend. Who is your friend? ¿Quién es tu amigo? Or as we saw before, we can also turn it into quiénes, which is the plural. So it means who or whom if you're talking about multiple people. So for example, instead of saying who is your friend, we can also say who are your friends. So we are now talking about multiple people. And so then we use quiénes. So quiénes son tus amigos? Who are your friends?
¿Quiénes son tus amigos? ¿Quiénes son tus amigos?
And as you might have noticed, the es, quién es tu amigo, turns into quiénes son tus amigos. And again, this is because we talk about multiple people, so everything in the sentence needs to change. So amigo becomes amigos, tú becomes tus. And so also es, which is turns into are. So who is your friend? Who are your friends? So instead of saying quién es, we say quiénes son. Now this might be a bit too much to handle all at the same time while learning these question words and everything. For now, don't worry about this. Just be aware that this is happening. Alright, so quién, who, or quiénes if we're talking about plural. We can also say de quién.
¿De quién? ¿De quién?
And the word de means of or from. So of who or from who, which in English we translate to whose.
¿De quién?
So for example, whose is this house? Whose house is this?
¿De quién es esta casa? ¿De quién es esta casa?
Whose house is this? And we see something important happening here, which is that in English we say whose house is this? But in Spanish we don't say de quién casa es esta, but we say de quién es esta casa. So again, as I explained before, in English we tend to flip the words around. In Spanish we don't do this. If we want to form a question sentence, then we simply just add question marks at the beginning and at the end of the sentence. We don't flip the whole sentence around. Alright, then the next word is
¿Cuándo? ¿Cuándo?
which means when.
¿Llega el tren?
When arrives the train? Llega arrives, el tren the train. So because we're talking about el tren, we use llega. When arrives the train?
¿Cuándo llega el tren? ¿Cuándo llega el tren?
When does the train arrive? And notice that I've highlighted the D because there's also cuánto, which is the next word that we'll learn.
¿Cuánto? ¿Cuánto?
Or,
¿Cuánta? ¿Cuánta?
which means how much or how many. So cuándo, when, cuánto, how much or how many. So for example, how much money do you have?
¿Dinero tienes? ¿Cuánto dinero tienes? ¿Cuánto dinero tienes?
How much money do you have? Again, tienes is tú tienes, but we leave out that tú at the beginning because tienes already tells us that we're talking about you. So,
¿Cuánto dinero tienes?
how much money do you have? Or when we talk about something feminine, so energía, for example, which ends with an A, it's a feminine word, la energía, we say cuánta. So cuánta energía, and then you can finish the sentence. How much energy?
¿Cuánta energía?
Or if we're talking about the plural, we can also turn it into cuántos. So we add the O at the end.
¿Cuántos?
Or cuántas.
¿Cuántas?
So cuánto, cuánta, cuántos, cuántas. Now remember, in the beginning you're likely going to make mistakes and you're not going to be sure whether to use cuánto, cuánta, cuántos, cuántas. Don't worry about this. This is totally normal. What I recommend you to do is to not try to rush making your sentence. It's okay if you take a break and you think first before you say something. And then you will find that after you use cuánto, cuánta a couple of times, eventually you will get the hang of it and you will know which one to use. And you'll become more and more fluent. Alright, the last question word that we'll learn in today's lesson is
¿Cuál? ¿Cuál?
which is what. Or if we say,
¿Cuáles?
we say which. So what,
¿Cuál?
which.
¿Cuáles?
Again, I know I keep repeating myself, I'm sorry, but it's very important that you get this right from the beginning. All of the question words always have accents. So again, the accent here is on the A. So for our example sentence, we have
¿Es tu favorito?
which is your favorite?
¿Es tu favorito?
Of course becomes
¿Cuál es tu favorito? ¿Cuál es tu favorito?
what is your favorite? Or if you want to turn this into plural, so ¿cuál es tu favorito? What is your favorite? Now becomes which are your favorites? Which are your favorites? And this becomes
¿Cuáles son tus favoritos? ¿Cuáles son tus favoritos?
which are your favorites? So we add the es at cuál, and then also we turn es to son, and tú to tus, and favorito into favoritos. So everything in the sentence either gets an extra S or changes. So for example, S becomes son. And some of these things we've not really went over yet. So for example, tú turns into tus, but we've never really went over tú to begin with. So it makes sense that you don't know that yet. Don't worry, I have a separate lesson which goes into that topic as well. So we'll get to that later. So let's do a little recap of all of the question words that we learned today. So we had
¿Qué?
which means what,
¿Por qué?
why,
¿Para qué?
which also means why, but more in a way of like for what reason or for what purpose. It's not really used that often, but it's good to know this question word in case you want to use it or you hear it. Then we had
¿Dónde? ¿Dónde? ¿Cómo?
how,
¿Quién?
who,
¿Quién es? ¿De quién?
of who or whose,
¿Cuándo?
with a D, when,
¿Cuánto? ¿Cuánta?
how much or how many. Or as we saw, we can also turn it into cuántos or cuántas.
¿Cuántos? ¿Cuántas?
And then the last question word,
¿Cuál? ¿Cuáles?
which is what or which. And as I said it before, all of the question words in Spanish have an accent or a tilde as we call it in Spanish. Alright, so that's it for this lesson. Please make sure to practice with these question words. They are very important. You will use them a lot. So it's good to know them by heart. Also, if you have any more questions, please feel free to reach out to me. And of course, you can get a recap of today's lesson on my website, SpanishWithWes.com. I'll provide the right link in the description. Alright, that's it for this lesson. Thank you so much for watching. Again, as always, I truly hope that this is helpful to you. The reason why I'm creating this whole course is to help other people. If you have any questions, please let me know. Alright, that's it for this lesson. Thank you so much. I hope to see you in the next one. Adios.